So good afternoon and welcome. I always look forward to coming here to the annual shareholder meeting and telling our story. It's a good story and I enjoy to tell it in front of the home team. Let's start with a recap of the highlights of last year. In each of the 4 quarters, we set a production record. Series production increased by 13% year on year to 3.5 million engine equivalents. But rather than the full year, I like to think of where we were finishing the year, and we went out of 2022 on a run rate of approximately 3.7 million engine equivalents. In fact, if you take the average from March all the way through to November, we were 3.64 million engine equivalents. It was only a slow start in January and in February, where we had 3.1 million in January, 3.0 million in February, and again a dip in December to 3.2 that pulled the full year average down to 3.5. But for me, we finished the year around 3.7. Revenue increased by 11.3 million crowns. That's a 10% year-on-year increase. And we managed to do that even though the installation revenue was down by 5.1 million. We had a full year operating result of 30.6 million crowns. That corresponds to a 25.3% operating margin and earnings per share of 4.68 crowns. The year could have been better. 1 year ago now, in the second quarter of 2022, you'll recall that we took back the WHB system from the WHB foundry in Brazil. After a lot of patience and a lot of effort, we had to walk away from that business. That affected the operating result by 5 million. So I think without the one-time effect, it would have been more representative to say a profit of 35 million and an operating margin of about 30%. So these are all good numbers, but for me, what I really measure is the series production, the engine equivalents. And at the end of the year, it was a disappointing finish for me. We had said that we would meet 4 million engine equivalents before the end of the year. We weren't able to do that. And I'd like to take some time to talk about why that happened. So here we see a plot of the series production over the last 15 years. I always like to show it in a longer perspective so we can really understand the evolution of the company. In these 15 years, we had a compounded annual growth of 13%, so exactly matching the year-on-year growth between 2021 and 2022. And what we see is that there's a lot of bumps in the road. There's a continuous improvement, but there are artifacts where the production goes down. And we know the reason for each of them. Back in 2008-9, of course, it was the economic crisis. In 2012-13, we had the stop of production of the Navistar 13-liter engine. It was about 20% of our volume when the production was stopped. New programs came on stream and we recovered. From 2015 through 2018, we had a flat patch. The reason is simple. We didn't have new programs coming on stream during that period. There was no real change in global economy, so we just ran flat. Then we had a couple of new programs coming on stream, 2017 and 2018, and of course the COVID in 2020. I think that we've recovered really well from the COVID. From a virus point of view, COVID is behind us. People don't even think about it anymore. But from an industry point of view, supply chains are still affected. We still feel the impact of COVID in many cases. We came back at the end of 22 to an all-time high, but in the fourth quarter, the production decreased, and to our disappointment, again, in the first quarter, the production decreased. And I'd like to take some time to look at that in more detail. The thing about SinterCast is that we have about 60 different programs in series production, but the top 10 of them give us more than 80% of our volume. So when 1 or 2 of those large programs is down, we go down. The positive side of it is, when we're trying to have double-digit growth every year for so many years, it seems impossible to do. But if we can just get one new program every year or one new program every 2 years, we can continue to maintain this growth of more than 10%. So there are two sides to the coin, and unfortunately at the moment, a couple of the higher volume programs are volatile, and we've been feeling the effects of that. The first impact is from our Super Duty programs, both the Ford Super Duty engine and the Cummins engine used in Ram Super Duty vehicles. And here we can see sales data for the Super Duty for both Ford and Ram for the entire last year. Normally, Ford sells around 40,000 per month. 40,000 per quarter. That's the total sales. We're only involved in the diesel. The diesel is about 2/3 of the take. Yeah, but this is showing the total volume. And you can see that in the third quarter, the Ford went down. That was because of a planned remodeling. Ford has 2 production facilities for Super Duty, one in Kentucky, one in Ohio. They finished the retrofit of the Kentucky facility last year, so that's fully up and running, but they're still going through the retooling of the Ohio facility, so we're feeling some impacts of that. And you can see again in the first quarter, the Ford went down. We have a good rapport with them, frequent dialogue. They explained to us that that's because of shortage in component supply. It will come back. They're very confident in the future volumes. So I think we're just going through a little bit of a rough patch on the Ford. And surprisingly, in the first quarter, the Ram was also down, and that is also due to component supply. We talked to them. They're very bullish about the production, so we think that that will come back to normal levels very soon. So those programs, particularly when they were both down in the first quarter, were the reason why our first quarter volume was lower than we expected. I'd also like to talk about the start of production of the Scania engine. As you know, we're supplying both the cylinder block and the cylinder head for the new 13-liter engine for the Traton Group. And I took this plot from the Traton 2022 annual report, just recently published, and they're showing the rollout for the CBE engine. It was first started for Scania volume in the beginning of 2022. In our first quarter report, we announced that we are now supplying both cylinder block and head to Navistar. But for us, this is an element of replacement volume. We already produced the 13-liter cylinder block for Scania, and we already produced the 13-liter cylinder block for Navistar. So the only thing that's new for us in this production is the cylinder head. For those of you who count in detail, the new CBE engine is about 8.5 engine equivalents per engine. 6 of those are for the cylinder block, 2.5 for the cylinder head. So as it's a replacement volume, 75% of the ramp of CBE goes to replacement and only 25% goes to incremental volume. And the big step for us comes next year when MAN comes on stream. We don't supply currently to MAN, so all of the volume will be new. It's one of the larger end users in the group. So we see that there will be a strong ramp in 24, a strong ramp in 25, and we'll get to mature volume at the end of 25 or early 26. And we still maintain that when this engine is at full volume, it will give 1 million incremental engine equivalents. Another thing that we had announced last year that was starting was the FAW 16-liter engine. We announced an introduction to the market in the second quarter of last year. Unfortunately, when FAW introduced the engine, commercial vehicle sales in China were down 61%. They finished the full year down 52%. And it wasn't a good time to launch a new engine. It wasn't a good time to launch a new product in the market. It was the first 16-liter engine in China. And unfortunately, we don't yet have any contribution from the FAW engines. I'll come back to FAW a little bit later in the presentation. Just one last thing regarding the recent production. Tupi was down for a period of about 10 days in March. So that affected March volume. It also will carry over into April shipments. So Unfortunately for us, the first 4 months of the year have been very difficult. A lot of different things conspiring to bring our volume down, but they're all temporary, and I believe that we get back on track very soon. So if we return to this plot, as an engineer, I like to draw a straight line through it. And through that straight line, there are times when the volume is up and times when the volume is down, times when we're disappointed, times when we're happy. We're just in a bit of a flat patch at the moment, and that will come back. But with this linear trajectory and with this 13% compounded annual growth over the last 15 years, I have every confidence that we make the 4 million engine equivalent milestone, every confidence that we make the 5 million engine equivalent milestone, and there are opportunities out there to get to 7 million. At the moment, the development pipe is as strong as it's ever been. We're working on a lot of new engines that will be launched in the lead up to Euro 7 emissions in 2027, and we're working on some new engines that have a launch plan for 2030. So it looks really good in the pipe, and I'm absolutely confident that we get to 5 million and a lot of opportunity for growth beyond that. As the series production grows, of course, the revenue grows. It also has some bumps in the road. 2017, a little bit low because we had a low year for installation revenue. 2019, a little bit high because we had a record year for installation revenue. And then the COVID in 2020 and a continuous recovery since then. 60 to 70% of our revenue is recurring revenue from software. Yeah, 20 to 30% of our revenue is recurring from the sampling consumables that we have exclusive supply for. So I think that sometimes we get grouped together with manufacturing companies because we work in this sector, but we're very much a software supplier and a service supplier. We're not really affected by inflation. We don't have a lot of materials demand. We don't use a lot of energy. So our cost side has remained quite stable. And our manning, last year we finished with 32 people. You may know that we hired 2 extra people for a succession plan for 2 colleagues that will retire in the first half of this year. Our general manager in China, Stephen Jin, retired at the end of April. One of our senior engineers will retire at the end of June, so we'll be back to 30. That's why I put the numbers here. If you use 32 people, we finished with 3.7 million Swedish crowns of revenue per employee. And if you use the 3 million of the base, we get to 4 million. And also with this 25% profit margin, it's approximately 1 million Swedish crowns per employee. And some time ago, a couple of years ago, ABG referred to SinterCast as possibly the most profitable company in the Nordic region. And as the volume grows and as the cost base remains rather stable, that profit margin will increase. And that's where we want to be. We want to be in the top handful of companies here in the Nordic region for profitability. And I think that we can do it for the long term. With the production, with the revenue, of course, the dividend grows. We have a proposed dividend later today. If that is approved, that will increase our cumulative dividend since 2011 to 282 million Swedish crowns. And interestingly, that's 13 consecutive years of increase for the dividend. There is a category called dividend aristocrat, companies that can maintain an increasing dividend for 25 consecutive years. And that is our next goal. We have a very strong dividend focus, and let's focus on that. There's also a category called Dividend King, where you have 50 consecutive years, but I'm going to leave that to the next guy. Let's look at our market sector by sector and go in a little bit more detail. So last year, 47% of our production was for heavy-duty commercial vehicles, clearly our largest sector. Also, as we've said for many years, our largest growth opportunity. Approximately 40% of long-haul heavy-duty trucks are produced in CGI today. We know with the demand on performance and fuel economy and emissions that most heavy-duty commercial vehicle engines will change to CGI before 2030. So there's a lot of growth opportunity for us in that. And I mentioned FAW earlier, so I want to come back to that in more detail. This shows the production of heavy-duty commercial vehicles in China and at FAW over the last 4 years. And what you can see is that FAW is the largest supplier in China, typically about 25% of the market. We also see this severe decrease in the market in 2022, 50% down. I want to compare FAW to the European market and the North American market. And here we can see that FAW alone is as big and sometimes bigger than all of Europe and sometimes bigger than all of America. And this is a fantastic growth opportunity for us. We're installed in their foundry in Changchun in China. The 16-liter engine has already been released. A 13-liter engine has been announced. They also have 11-liter engine, which we've been supporting the development for. We don't know yet what the rollout plan will be. We don't know yet which products will be committed to CGI, but there's a huge growth opportunity. Some of the FAW volume is already in the plan to 5 million, and a lot of the FAW growth is in our opportunity to get to 7 million. So this is really tangible stuff. Our engineers will be in FAW next week to help them support the ramp of those programs. But also, commercial vehicles are a growth sector. And this is an interesting plot that shows the growth in transportation from 2005, which is factual data, to 2030 and 2050, which are forecast. And you see that road transportation will increase significantly. Rail transport will also increase. Marine transport will increase. All forms of transport will increase. And this increases the market opportunity for SinterCast. More trucks on the road. We've already talked about Super Duty, so let me move on to the full-size pickup. That is last year 11% of our volume. It's a 2.7-liter V6 petrol engine. It is used primarily in F-150, but in recent years it's been rolled out to other vehicles. It is now option engine on the Ford Bronco. Over the last years we've been producing just over 30,000 per month. The plan is for it to grow to over 40,000 per month. It is a base engine for Ford. It will have a very long future, go well beyond 2030, and eventually it will be hybridized. It's not a secret, and Ford hasn't told me that, but all engines will be hybridized, and so it's natural that it will as well. And as the smallest and most fuel-efficient engine in the F-150 lineup, it will surely be one that they take the furthest. We can also touch on our two smaller programs. So we don't really talk about cars. This is a mid-size pickup. It's the Ford Ranger and the Volkswagen Amarok. They both use our 3-liter V6 diesel engine. We had previously thought that 3-liter V6 would sundown around 2027 because of European emissions legislation, and that's really changed for us. So Ford is committed to a new manufacturing facility in South Africa to serve the Asia-Pacific market and the African market. They've also committed to a new manufacturing facility in Argentina to serve Latin America. All of those castings are SinterCast CGI. We've had a really strong growth in the first half of this year. And these are not at all subject to electrification in those regions. Electrification won't come in Asia-Pacific, neither in Latin America for the foreseeable future. So again, a very long timeline. And for the rail sector, marine sector, off-road construction and agriculture, we have good development programs, but the fact is that the volumes are small, and so it's always going to be a smaller part of our overall production. Let's come back to each of those sectors and talk about them in more detail with regard to electrification, because of course electrification is a current topic and many people are concerned about the longevity. So let's take them one by one. Let's begin by looking at the share of vehicle powertrains here in Europe. This is from the first quarter of 2023. Yeah? And you see that it is more than 96% diesel. Likewise, in the United States, it's more than 97% diesel. So we are the embedded technology. I think that we have an extremely long future in this heavy-duty sector. I'd like to share a publication from the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency in the United States, and they have published what they call a blueprint for technology solutions to get to net zero in 2050. And you can see in the plot they have a matrix for battery electric vehicles, for hydrogen vehicle, either used in a fuel cell or in an internal combustion engine, and for liquid fuels such as carbon neutral fuels and biofuels. And you can see on the third line in green, I can point here, in the third line in green for long-haul heavy-duty trucks, they have 1 for battery, 3 for hydrogen, and 2 for sustainable fuels. This is in 2050. And this is part of the confidence we have in the long-term viability of internal combustion engines. As I've said before, I think that the dialogue will evolve from engines to energy. And so long as we can have clean energy, then we can also benefit from the high efficiency of the internal combustion engine. And before we move on, we can see also for rail, there is a mix. Also for marine, bias toward liquid fuels and hydrogen. And a lot of people have very bold comments about the future of electrification. But the truth is it will be a mix. It's always a mix. And it will be in this complex industry as well. As we move to Super Duty pickups, I have a very powerful quote here from just 6 or 7 months ago from Automotive News in the United States, where they're speaking about the Super Duty sector and how they are holdouts from the electrification. And this quote from the president of Ford, if you're pulling 10,000 pounds, 4,500 kilograms, if you're pulling 10,000 pounds, an electric truck is not the right solution. And 95% of our customers tow more than 10,000 pounds. And we see in this highlighted section where the executives from the big three, Stellantis now, General Motors, Ford, saying that these Super Duty vehicles will likely be among the last vehicles in the industry to get battery power, if they ever do. So again, very long timeline for our vehicles, very strong security for SinterCast. On the full-size pickup, as I said, this engine will ultimately be hybridized. It's the smallest, lightest, and most fuel efficient, so it will have the longest timeline. It will go well into the 2030s with confidence. And then finally, the mid-size pickup and the off-road application. Where we are using these mid-size pickups, we don't have an exposure to electrification. And I want to point out, at the moment, about 2% of our production is for cars. So we hear a lot of discussion about cars going to electric. We don't have an exposure to cars. We also don't have an exposure to diesel. Everything that we are working on has a long timeline. And while we're looking at the off-road sector, I'd just like to share this. It's from a recent presentation, but it just shows the density, the energy density of different types of fuels. So this is for a tractor, and they talk about the energy needed for 10 hours of plowing. The tractor itself weighs 10.9 tons. Today, to plow for 10 hours, you would need 590 liters of diesel fuel, which weighs 540 kilograms. But if you were to use batteries, you would need 10 tons of batteries to do the same job, and the battery pack would be the size of 3,454 liters. It isn't viable, and we're not going to be challenged in that sector. It's a small sector for us, but I want to put it in perspective. Let's move on. About a year ago, together with Tupi and Ricardo Consulting Engineers in the UK, we introduced what we called the ultralight engine concept, where a CGI cylinder block would have the same weight as an aluminum cylinder block. You all saw it in the lobby before the meeting. Tupi has done a very good job of promoting this concept. We do have development programs underway. The way it works in the industry is that the OEM will allocate funds to make a development. At the end of the development, the team will present the engine to management, and the engine will then either be approved or not approved for production. But we have development programs underway. We're hopeful that they will be approved, and I think it can be a really interesting concept, either for engines that are internal combustion only, or as a range extender or a supplemental power in a hybrid package. So it's a really interesting opportunity, and we look forward to following that over the next few years. We're also active in the development of hydrogen heavy-duty engines. This is an engine that was introduced at the engine conference in Baden-Baden in Germany at the end of February. It's from MAN. Tupi has the exclusive supply of the cylinder head for this program. It's produced in CGI with our technology. The engine satisfies Euro 7 emissions, Euro 7 coming in 2027. Of course, it has no CO2 emissions because it's a hydrogen engine, but it satisfies Euro 7 for NOx emissions and also for particulates. It's based on the D38 engine of MAN, which is a 15.2-liter diesel. They increase the cylinder bore to get more displacement for the hydrogen engine because hydrogen doesn't quite have the energy density of diesel. So it's a 16.8-liter engine. You see that it has 380 kilowatts of power. I frequently talk about the peak firing pressure in the engine, you know, how hard you squeeze the fuel to make it combust. And the harder you squeeze, the more power you get. And instead of squeezing hard like we do in a diesel, this concept squeezes to 170 bar and uses a spark plug to start the ignition. And you hear a lot about hydrogen engines nowadays. All of the hydrogen engines that are being introduced to the market today are all spark ignition. Yeah? And because of the lower pressure, we have 45% thermal efficiency, and you will soon see trucks on the road with hydrogen tanks similar to this behind the cab. But we want to go to the next step. And last year, I introduced a new project that was being conducted by Tupi, together with Westport, the fuel injection people, and with AVL, the engine design consulting firm based in Austria. I'm very flattered that Tupi has appointed me to serve on the advisory board of this group, along with 9 other people appointed by either Westport or AVL. I'm happy to report that the first engine is now in operation on a test bench. The goal, instead of using a spark now, is to squeeze really hard, also with hydrogen, to get high thermal efficiency, above 50%, to get higher power, so the power will be the same as in a diesel engine package, and we'll have the range of a diesel engine, and all of the benefits. We can use the existing production facilities for the engine, the maintenance facilities. You may not know, but fuel cells require a very pure hydrogen supply, but the internal combustion engine can tolerate lower purity supply. So that is an advantage from the infrastructure side. And together, the partners in the project believe that this will be the most durable carbon neutral alternative compared to batteries, compared to fuel cells, and even compared to diesel engines running on renewable diesel fuel. So really promising development and something that the entire industry is following. Let's start to wrap up. We'll talk a little bit about our climate contribution. Many of you have seen this before. It's in the sustainability section on our website. But we can break down our contribution to carbon reduction. And we have a very big role to play because our engines are more fuel efficient than alternatives. Typically for a new engine, where we use SinterCast CGI for both the cylinder block and head, the fuel savings will be about 8%. A truck of that size normally runs about 120,000 kilometers per year. It consumes around 27 liters of fuel per 100 kilometers. That means that we save 2,500 liters of fuel. Every liter of fuel generates 2.5 kilograms of CO2. So that translates to 6,250 kilograms of CO2 saved. And today we're supporting the production of between 150 and 175,000 trucks. So multiply that out, it's a contribution of about 1 million tons of CO2 per year. And indeed, that number 1 million is based on us claiming credit for only 3 of the 8% fuel efficiency improvement. We say that the remaining 5 can come from the other good things that the OEM has done, like reducing rolling resistance, reducing aerodynamic resistance, improved transmissions, and so on. So we only took 3% credit. Likewise, in the Super Duty sector, we have about 20% better fuel economy than the nearest engine option. That goes to 40% when we're towing, and we just heard the president of Ford saying that most people use those vehicles for towing. We save, the average driver of a Super Duty diesel in the United States saves 1,000 liters of fuel per year. We're currently supporting the production of around 1,000 vehicles per day, together with Ford and Ram. And again, that translates to 1 million tons of CO2 per year. And finally, for F-150, as I said before, we're the most fuel-efficient engine option. Interestingly, the engine that we have today is 27% more fuel efficient than the engine that was used on F-150 in the year 2000 when we first started series production at SinterCast. On average, our engine consumes 1 liter less fuel per 100 kilometers than the other F-150 engine options. The average driver drives 20,000 kilometers per year. It means a saving of 0.5 tons of CO2 per year per vehicle. And for F-150, we're producing about 300,000 per year. As I said earlier, that engine now, the production has increased for other vehicles. In total, we're producing around 400,000 per year today, but we've allocated 300,000 of those to F-150. And it's a saving of 150,000 tons per year. But what's really interesting in all of this is that you don't just save the CO2 in the year that we build the vehicle. That vehicle is on the road for 10 or 15 years, and it makes the same fuel saving every year throughout the life of the vehicle. And when you do the math, and you can see it in more detail on our website, we have contributed to the avoidance of approximately 8 million tons of CO2 in 2022, and since we started our high volume production in 2003, approximately 50 million tons. So a really significant contribution. And I took the opportunity to go to the Tesla annual impact report, and it's interesting that they have such a similar number. In 2021, the global fleet of Tesla vehicles, plus their energy storage and their solar panels, enabled customers to avoid emitting 8.4 million metric tons of CO2. So SinterCast making a contribution on the same level as Tesla. I did also look at their 2022 impact report. That number has now increased to 13.4 million metric tons. They sold more vehicles, they made more contribution. We do exactly the same. As we make more vehicles, we'll make a bigger contribution. And that will grow as we get to 5 million and 6 million and 7 million engine equivalents. Before finishing, I'd like to remind about the World Foundry Trade Fair that will take place in Dusseldorf next month. You may remember that GIFA occurs every 4 years. So we very much look forward to getting back to Dusseldorf and hosting our customers and displaying our technology. We will have the CGI on display. We'll also have our tracking technologies, the ladle tracker and the cast tracker on display. So it's a really great opportunity for us to host our customers. I look forward to that. Something else to look forward to, We will host an investor open house at our technical center in Katrineholm. The date will be 21 September. The idea is that we will host 3 or 4 groups of something like 10 people per group. It will be for our shareholders, also for potential investors. And yeah, we really look forward to that, showing you our facility. We'll also be able to make a tour of the neighboring SKF foundry to see where we make all of our development, to see liquid iron that for those of us in SinterCast got us hooked to the industry. So you're most welcome. Look for more information on that in our website as we come into the summer, and we'll have registration details and schedules available. Okay, so to close, we have strong double-digit growth in our history. I believe in equally strong double-digit growth in our future. There's no question that we get to 4 million. I'm frustrated and disappointed and embarrassed that we're not there yet. We will get there. We will get to 5 million. We will have growth beyond. We will maintain our strong profitability. The revenue will grow. The cost side won't grow. I mentioned that in the summer we will be 30 people. I will be very surprised if in 2030 we have more than 31 or 32. We're not going to grow the cost side of the company. We have the team that we need. We will maintain our dividend focus with the ambition to become dividend aristocrats with 25 consecutive years of increasing dividend. We're more than halfway there, which is great. I'm absolutely comfortable with the longevity of our market. More than 90% of our production is in big things, which is not directly or immediately threatened by all of the discussion we hear in the market about electrification. And we make a really significant contribution to the climate and to CO2. And I think that there has been a lot of discussion that is negative about our industry, but we've done so much. SinterCast was founded in the 1980s. If you compare a truck today and the emissions from a heavy-duty truck, you would need 60 trucks today to make the same emissions of a truck that was produced in 1990. We're saving 8 million tons of CO2. There's this discussion about our children wanted us to start earlier. I think we did start early. I think we were doing it before most of the rest of them. Thank you.